Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of the Ultimate Wellness Group Transformation Tuesday. We thank you for spending some of your Tuesday evening with us. I am actually in Southern California, so it was a beautiful day today. No clouds, no chemtrails, sunshine, about 70 degrees, so it was a wonderful day. I hope the weather was beautiful where you are and you are ready for a beautiful show this evening. Today's subject matter is transgenderism, Dwayne Wade, the LGBTQ community, and you. Of course, we all have seen quite a few posts about Dwayne Wade's son, who they named Zion when he was born. Jerron, thank you for coming in. Named him Zion when he was a little boy, and I think within the last last few months, the young man named Zion has decided that he wants to live how he believes he is inside as a woman, and now his name is Zaya. And of course, there's been plenty heat that Dwayne Wade has received for going public with this and making this a public reality, and so on. So we're going to discuss that today. We're going to go into some of the scientific aspects of why the person that you're listening to today believes that a person can be born homosexual, can be born transgender. And let me be very clear, I'm not saying that God did that, but I do believe they can be born that way. So after we get into a little of the science today, then you have to come to your own conclusion. And then there'll be a couple of other conclusions that I will make, and it will be up to your discretion to decide how you plan on doing this. But all of us have children, and I'm sure all of us love our children, and so that's one of the things we have to take in consideration with Dwayne Wade is that I'm sure he loves his children, and so how do we deal with that? You know, when we see something that we don't necessarily agree with, we don't like, whatever the case may be, how do we deal with that as a person who's dealing with that in their own life, with their own children, people that they brought in the world, and so obviously they probably love that person, right? Zena Hayes, thank you for coming in. And we're also going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to make just a couple of last statements about this coronavirus, and then we're going to get into the show, okay? So thank you all for coming in. Let's get started. We ask God to give us the presence and the ability to be present, to learn information, gather information, to help change our lives, and give us the ability to apply this information and use this information to better our health condition or our health journey. And I also ask for the person that you're listening to, Dr. Akili, to have protection from his ego and from his arrogance and to be a vessel for your benefit. So without any further from me, let's get to the show. The first thing that I want to do is just mention that somebody reached out to me and asked me about a medication called Tamiflu, Tamiflu. Zambezi, thank you for coming in. This medication is prescribed by a lot of doctors for flu or viral infections, but typically they use it for the flu. That's why it's Tamiflu, right? They started promoting that to doctors in the late 90s into the 2000s. It was a big push to use this type of medication for the common cold, for the flu, and any other viral infections that we thought people may have. And the studies after the medication came out, for at least I think the first 10 to 15 years with that, the medication was relatively worthless. And, you know, for those of you who heard my coronavirus program, you know, by the time you develop the cold symptoms of the runny nose and the cough and the fever and all the symptoms that we get, that virus has been in your body sometimes for a few weeks. Not necessarily, or for sure not when you get the symptoms. Now, this medication called Tamiflu has to be taken before those virus particles actually start to infect those cells, or when they're affecting the cells. That's the only time that it can be effective. So imagine that. Here it is, you're going to a doctor because you have a cold, you have a flu, you have something that you caught from somebody else. Sometimes you don't even know what to call it. But you are displaying the symptoms of a runny nose, a cough, a fever, feeling bad, body aches, maybe all these type of things. It's way too late for any medication. At that point, your body is attacking it because it has already affected your cells, and many of them. It would have to be millions of cells to produce those type of symptoms. So here it is that you are already in the aspect of being infected, not the prodrome, right? Because when we talk about viruses, when the virus gets into your body, there is a prodrome phase, meaning the number of days before it takes to actually infect the body and start causing symptoms, start causing problems. And what is your body doing? Trying to fight it. But if you get to the point where you start having symptoms, that means when you get to the point where your body starts having symptoms, that means you lost the fight. That means the virus overtook your body's ability to stay healthy. I hope this makes sense. So if you get Tamiflu from a doctor and they're prescribing you this after you have a fever, after you have a cough, after you have runny nose, after you have all of these symptoms that you consider flu or cold symptoms, that medicine is absolutely worthless and will do you no good. And the reason why I'm stating this is because somebody called me within the last couple of days asking me about what I thought about whatever. And they said that the doctor gave his wife for their child Tamiflu. And I was like, well, hey, you have to do what you want to do. I mean, you've never heard me promote or suggest Tamiflu. And I'm not saying that as a knock. I'm just saying in general, if anybody calls me for specific advice, the advice is still going to be founded on what I teach in my programs, because that is my philosophy. I'm not going to change up and do something different. Joseph, thank you for coming in. So the point of this whole thing is that Tamiflu as a medication is absolutely worthless in general, because they've never studied it to have any true effectivity. And then secondly, by the time you develop symptoms, there is no medication that's going to stop you from getting infected by a virus anyway, okay? So I hope I cleared that up. As far as I'm concerned, Raymond Rogers, thank you for coming in. As far as I'm concerned, I tried to empty myself in the coronavirus program. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, go back and check it out. The media is continuing to flood us with information that's causing people to worry. And I discussed that in that program. You have to stop being worried. You have to use your mind, your energy, and your activity to do the things that benefit your body, and don't give in to all this public craze that's going on in the name of coronavirus and the fact that it's a pandemic now. Whether that is true, whether it's not true, or whether it is just being promoted that way, there's still things that you have to do. So please check out the video. I'm not going to go in depth into coronavirus. I think I did everything on that video. I just wanted to put some thoughts out there. Alan Bowden and Kimberly Harris, thank you for coming in. And so, get on your program. I wanted to just mention this today. I saw this on MSN Health today. I don't know what you all think about this man, but I don't think much good of him, because I have done a lot of research into some of the things that he has done. It says Bill Gates says we need to do 3 things to better manage pandemics. Thank you for coming in, Raymond. Appreciate the compliment. What do we need to do to better manage pandemics? And so there's some pretty interesting points that this man makes in here that should make all of us kind of step back and say, what does that mean? So he's talking about the coronavirus in here, right? And then he says that the New England Journal of Medicine explains that public health experts have warned of a serious pandemic for years. How does a public health expert, how can they predict and warn for a pandemic that's coming? Pandemics are supposed to be infections that we don't know anything about, that we don't have any control of, and that happen in a way in nature that we don't have any control over. So how would these people be warning us for years? Now look what he says here. Global experts have been saying for years that another pandemic whose speed and severity rivaled those of the 1918 influenza epidemic. Well, what's interesting about the 1918 influenza epidemic, if you go back and do research, is that a great majority of the people that were infected in that pandemic and that epidemic were immunized. And guess what Bill Gates is a huge proponent of? Immunizations. Yes, that's right. So here he goes down to say, in the past weeks started to behave a lot like the once-in-a-century pathogen we've been worried about. If you've been worried about something for once in a century, how can you predict it if you don't know anything about it? Or is it something that we are planning and are working, and these type of things that happen in Wuhan are a test to see how effective their research is getting them? I know some people may think I'm crazy. It's okay, you can think what you want to, but what I am is honest, and I'm going to tell you what my research dictates me to say. Yvette Hasty, Latonia, thank you for coming in. Latonia, I'm sorry, I missed your name. So what should we do? Gates suggests wealthier governments donate to low and middle income countries. Well, that's already happening all over the world. And I don't know how much information you all have done, how much research you have done on immunizations, but in Africa, in some of the South American countries, and some of the poor Asian countries, the United States is going to these countries and telling them, if you want aid from us to build your infrastructure, to make a new airport, to make your ports and all these type of things, you have to have a certain amount of your population that will accept your religious organization have to accept same-sex marriage. We're finding in a lot of African countries that the countries that have the highest HIV infection rate and the countries that have the highest AIDS death are the countries that have the highest vaccine populations. So I don't think these things are just happenstance. All right, so now what does he say here? Helping African and South Asian countries get ready now, we can save lives and slow the global circulation of the virus. A global circulation of the virus. See, he's spitting out information that doesn't sound like somebody that doesn't know something is about to happen. Why would any person that's talking about large infections be talking about a global circulation of the virus when that's very, very, not only is it very rare, but the only couple of times that it's happened, there have been huge questions about how it happened. It did not happen by nature. It didn't happen by animals getting infected and then that went to humans and then humans started traveling or traveled in the wind patterns. That has never happened. So see, we have to really be very careful when we read things like this by so-called these philanthropic people. Alprintis Blanks, Latrice, thank you for coming in. So now look what he says. Second, Gates asserts that more efforts need to be put towards finding treatments and vaccines for this new virus, right? Now here it is, we're only in a few weeks. This virus started at the end of 2019. We're in March, so we've had something that's been around for just a few months, and they're talking about a vaccine already. You all, they make many dollars, billions and trillions of dollars on treatments and vaccines. So when somebody like Bill Gates starts talking, you all can check out the rest of that if you'd like to, the rest of that article. But to me, that whole article is glaring with information that tells us that we need to label this dude extremely dangerous, and anything that comes out of his mouth needs to be something that we highly question. Tyrese Hill, thank you for coming in. Now you say, no, you're not crazy. Better wake up and quit. The worst is just yet to come. Wait until you see all the artificial intelligence, your cashier, docs, all about to become robots, take a lot of people out of jobs. Y'all better research. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we have to consider. You know, good point you make, Tyrese, because at the end of the day, we know there are a lot of things that are coming. Technology does have its benefits, but technology also have its detriments, right? But, you know, another discussion for another time. We have to start discussing how we are going to take those type of ideas into our own control. And just real quickly, I would suggest, if you all think that some of the things, if any of you do think that some of the things I'm saying are a little outlandish, a little crazy, my suggestion would be to get a book called Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington, where she discusses a lot of the experiments that have been going on in black people all over this country and darker skinned people all over this world for centuries. Another book that may be interesting that you need to read is Acres of Skin. Philadelphia prisons and other prisons in the United States, they did a lot of experiments on prisoners because they had a controlled environment on the type of skin products that men and women use. So all the damage and all the destruction and all the toxicity and all the negative things, they did all that experimentation on prisoners. And now you get to put lotion on your skin, or you do shaving cream, or you do some type of hair removal products. That was tested on people. That wasn't done in a laboratory only on animals. After they finish with the animals, they go try to find people to do these things on. And so people have been treated like animals and worse for many, many years. I don't know if you all know this, but a lot of the procedures that dentists do on people, like this part is called maxillary, right? This is called your mandibular. All of the type of procedures that they do on the TMJ joint and these all mouth parts were done on slaves in dental schools with no deadening medicine. So they would put a black person on a table and cut them open, and the person would pass out, and they're doing anatomical research and looking all up into the nerves and all that kind of stuff. Black person will wake up in extreme pain, and they have them tied down to these tables, keep on doing the thing, that people pass out again. That's the type of horrific stuff that was done to dark-skinned people on this continent in the name of medicine. And so as we go further into this program today about transgenderism, homosexuality, and all of these different things that the LGBTQ community is pushing on the public, and yes, I do mean pushing, because you're not listening to the type of person that is going to fall victim to any pressure. There's nobody that's going to tell me I have to tone down what I say. There's nobody that's going to tell me I can't speak the truth that I believe, and nobody's going to tell me that I have to learn a certain word. I have to use certain type of language when and now if I decide to do that, that's my decision. But if I don't, I have that right. So as I go through today's program, I want you to understand that I really don't want this to be any bashing. So I don't want comments of bashing homosexuals or people that we get. That's not necessary for us to do those type of things. But we are going to have a scientific conversation about how transgenderism, homosexuality, and all these things are a part of our reality. It's a great growing part of our reality, and we have to learn how to deal with it. Tyree says, you familiar with Derek Grace? I think so. I think that, tell me a little more about it, but I think he has like social media. He talks about all the health things, I believe. Julian Vaughn, thank you for coming in. You said the coronavirus is attacking on an individual basis. People with high-risk health problems are more prone to getting it than the average person. Yes, and I discussed that in my program, so thank you for that point. Now, today, what I want to do is get into some information about what this country has been doing. You see that letter there, right? That's the National Memorandum 200 by Henry Kissinger. Presented this to the United States government in December 10th of 1974. And the type of information that is in this means that he was probably, or he had people studying to produce this document many, many years before he presented it to them. So that means that this document is in 1974, and I personally know that the documentation of experiments going on by this government, by the NIH and other aspects of the government, started in the 40s and the 50s. So studies on homosexuality in this country is older than most of us that are on this call, on this program tonight. So let's understand, again, as I go into some things, if there are any homosexuals or transgender people listening, or you hear this program in the future, understand that there's no vitriol coming from this man that's doing this program. But we do have to, in the black community, in the dark-skinned community as a whole, and people in general, have to start having some real conversations about homosexuality and how it is progressing in the way that it is, why bills are being made to force certain things. And then, I don't know if you all have heard of Rizza Islam. If you have, then you may have heard about this post that he did a couple of weeks ago where he had this transgender person that was discussing the fact that they think that the homosexual, the LGBTQ community is pushing their agenda on people. And the point that the person was making was that when you try to push something on people, they're going to fight back. But at the end of the day, I'm not fighting back out of emotions. I want to have a discussion on why we should be considering this. So here's one of the things it says in this program. The second, do you see number 2? The second new feature of population trends is a sharp differentiation between rich and poor countries. Now, when people like him and people in general talk about rich and poor countries, the rich countries are pretty much America, the European countries, and sometimes they're considering China. Since 1950, population in the former group has been growing at 0 to 1.5% per year, and the latter 2 to 3.5. What are they saying? All you dark people are reproducing from 2 to 3.5%, while those of us who don't have a lot of melanin are reproducing from 0 to 1.5, meaning that all you dark people are going to mess around and turn this whole world into a dark place, and there are not going to be many of us left. And so, as we all know, a racist mind would never want anything like that to happen. So a racist mind is going to what? Go into action to try to keep that from happening. So here's some other things that I think are interesting. Again, you can go get this, pull it up yourself, and look at it in depth. It's talking about the population. They're back in '74. They're saying that the population could get to 12 or 15 billion, implying a 5 to 7-fold increase. But they have a decision. Now here's humans trying to act as if they're God. They want to keep it to 8 to 9 billion. So they're talking about decreasing or maintaining a population 12 to 15 down to 8 to 9. So we're talking about 3 to 5 billion people. They're talking about either not allowing to be born, or they're talking about killing them, right? That's really what we're talking about. It is possible to feed over 8. Technological developments will make it possible to feed over 8, much less 12 billion in 21st century. So then they start going into how to make enough food and clean water and medications and housing and all that kind of stuff. But again, the reason why I started with Bill Gates is because there are many times where people will do memorandums like this, and they'll use all these words as if they're philanthropic and they care about people and all that kind of stuff. But in essence, this is some real diabolical, evil, vitriolic information in here, but they're making it to a place where if we come back and we read it like we're doing right now, all these years later, that we don't really understand what they really mean. So, where am I now? 28b. Actions to keep the ultimate level as close as possible to 8 billion, rather than permitting it to reach 10 billions, 13 billions or more. So again, we're talking 2 to 5 or more billion people either not being born or being killed, right? I'm just going to go through a few more things, and because I want us to really take in consideration why there are so many people out here talking about a plan for homosexuality. This is it, family planning, right? Information and materials based on present technology should be made fully available as rapidly as possible to the 85% of the population. And LDC, I don't remember exactly what that stands for, but the essence they're talking about just the lower people of the world, the poor and the darker skin. That's really what they're talking about. A little more, and then we're going to move into more aspects, okay? I hope you all are not getting bored by this. D, initiate an international cooperative strategy of national research programs on human reproduction and fertility control, covering biomedical and socioeconomic factors as proposed by U.S. delegation at Bucharest. What does that mean? All the research they have been doing about homosexuality and infertility programs, they're going to other parts of the world and teaching people this in the 70s, right? Again, that might be prior to some of us on this call, right? So now we're going to move down a little deeper into this, talk about a few more things, and we're going to go right into the program. You all bear with me. I pray that I'm not boring you. I pray that I'm giving you some information so that we can be more qualified to deal with some of the things that we are seeing. And I'm going to get to those comments in a little while. So what am I, third paragraph? Okay, so here's the common strategy for dealing with rapid population growth should encourage constructive actions to lower fertility, since population growth over the years will seriously negate reasonable prospects for the sound social and economic development of the peoples involved. So that to me means that somebody's coming up with a plan, somebody's planning on implementing a plan, but they're worried about what the people are going to think when they learn about the plan. So they have to have things in place to deal with those of us who will learn about it and then start trying to tell people what's going on. So look here. A lot of people think that, like for instance me, I'm just going to use myself as an example. A lot of people will hear me say certain things and they think that I'm anti-woman. There's nothing about me that's anti-woman. But what I do know is that the climate that we live in today with all the feminism, that is a plan. Now, if you don't believe me, see what you think about this. 1974 again, right? There's also a danger that some leaders will see developed country pressures for family planning as a form of economic or racial imperialism. This could well create a serious backlash. So that's what they're concerned about, what the backlash is going to be of people that don't agree with your points, right? And so when we start talking about putting more women in the workplace, that's in this program. When we start talking about fertility and reproductive programs and limiting people from having a certain number of children in a year, I mean, who gets to make those decisions? You know, somebody gets to sit up in an office in some country discussing amongst themselves what's going to happen to 2 or 3 or 4 billion people on the planet Earth. I mean, if we don't know these type of things, then that's why we can get caught up. So just a few more points. The U.S. also proposed to join with other developed countries in an international collaborative effort of research in human reproduction and fertility control, covering big medical and socioeconomic factors. Medical and socioeconomic factors. That means a lot. And that can it could also be tied to so many other things. It's very difficult for somebody to come to a conclusion on what they meant, but if we look at the society in today's time, we could come to an agreement that there are a lot of things that this could mean, and that a lot of things that we see going on in society are not by happenstance. So Julian Vaughn, you said, do you think it's more of a reproductive problem? I'm gonna get to that in just a minute. I will. Michelle, thank you for coming in. You say, I think LDC is least developed country. I think that's correct. So thank you. So again, we're talking about poor countries, darker skinned countries, countries that don't have the ability to have roads and tall buildings and all the different things that we have in this country that we have a benefit of. And when they desire that for their countries, a lot of times when they come to large countries like the United States, there are a lot of things tied to that. No different than the stuff that we see right in our own neighborhoods, right? When I was young, I remember when crack first came into Southern California. I remember when the guns first came in Southern California. I remember some of my homeboys were a little older than I was when I was in junior high school that were broke and poor like everybody else, dressed like everybody else. And within a week or two, when all that crack came into Southern California, they started driving big cars and wearing suits and all that kind of stuff. But what also came with that was a lot of death, right? In order for you to be able to get some dope to go out and sell and make this money, there were certain things that you had to do for the main dope dealer or the man that was connected to the CIA. Most of us know in these days it was Rick Ross, but back then we didn't know that's who it was. We heard of his name over the years in the streets, but there were some ties to getting some dope so you could come up. And so that's the same process we're talking about. Some of these poor countries are asking the United States, can you come and build us some infrastructure on our roads? Come build us some infrastructure on our ports and build us some infrastructure on our airports. Well, what are you going to do for us? And so there's a lot of stuff that's in this document that I would suggest we all just take a little time and read through. You don't have to read everything. What's the last one? The last one I wanted to get to is on 89. So let me get here real quick, and then we'll get into some scientific information and get this conversation going. And while I'm going down here, Julian, do I think it's more of a reproductive problem? Can you please clarify to me what you mean by that? Am I talking about, is the transgender thing a reproductive problem, or do I think that there is more of a reproductive problem, like from the foods and the other things that are in the environment? Clarify that for me to that answer. Okay, so here is the last point that I want, the last few points. So they're saying increased aid, and that has a lot to it, right? Bilateral and central funded programs consistent with geographic priorities. So again, it's all those LDCs, those poor countries. Multilateral and private organizations. So that's where people like Bill Gates come in, people that have a lot of money, and they want to be involved in making sure they maintain their billionaire or trillionaire status, because that's where some of them are headed, right? They're making so many billions now, they'll be making trillions soon. They don't want to see the end to that. They want to keep the general population all over the world poor so that they can maintain being in crazy wealth while all of us fight and just do the things that continue to make them wealthy. Further research on the relative impact of various socioeconomic factors and desired family size, and experimental efforts to test the feasibility of larger scale efforts to affect some of these factors. That is one of the statements that I believe is associated with homosexuality. Additional big medical research to improve the existing means of fertility control. What is fertility control? Birth control pills and anything else that they can do in the food, the water, because it's not a happenstance that our brother Tyrone Hayes found that these frogs were starting to develop female organs, or their male organs were becoming feminized by atrazine. It is also not happenstance that in Florida and other places in the southern regions, alligators' testicles are starting to shrink. Their fertility rates are starting to go down because of what? High estrogen levels in the water. Where does all that estrogen come from? Innovative approaches to providing family planning services, such as commercial channels for distribution of contraceptives, the development of low-cost systems for delivering effective health and family planning services to 85% of the population. That's a whole lot of people. That's the majority of people on the planet Earth. Excuse me. And then it says here, expanded efforts to increase awareness of leaders and publics regarding the consequences of rapid population growth. So that's just basically, that last part is just talking about propaganda to leaders, right? Because it actually goes in there. They said that they wanted to get to the young leaders of a lot of the organizations in these areas. Now, again, some people may get angry at some of the things I'm saying. That's neither here nor there, because there's no intent to anger anybody. There's no intent to have any vitriol. But if you go and you do some research on the Black Lives Matter movement that started in places like Ferguson and other places, there was a lot of rumbling in some of the street soldiers that were saying that all the people in positions of power were homosexuals. And some of you have heard of this guy named D. Ray. He became popular during Ferguson. You remember the three sisters that were part of the Black Lives movement, and later it was like they became like the so-called leaders of it. They were all homosexual. So, I mean, what I'm saying isn't far-fetched, because it's in this memorandum, and this memorandum was around before all of them were born. But here it is in the 2000s, the late 2000s, a lot of the social organizations are led by homosexuals. The Me Too movement is mostly homosexual women. So, this memorandum that was written a long time ago, we don't understand how powerful some of these people are in these positions, right? And so when you start talking about the fact that they were discussing putting women more in the workforce, and now in 2020, in just the black population in America, black women are in corporate America way greater than 50% than black men. When I finished medical school, which was 25 years ago, my entering class was 50-50. We had an even number of men and an even number of women. It has never been that way since. Every year since I finished medical school, the female population in medical school and law school and college in general has gone up, and the male population has continued to go down. Now, you mean to tell me that if we can look at the statistics in our race, and then we look at this memorandum that was written before most of us were alive, that doesn't have anything to do with each other? Something for you to think about. I'm not going to answer all the questions. I'm going to ask a lot of them, though. Aaliyah, thank you for coming in. So let's get into this thing about transgenderism, all right? Now, if I may first, and I hope that if you have children watching, you let them know that we are going to do a little anatomy. Nothing vulgar that's going to happen here, but I do want to make sure that everybody understands some of the points that I'm going to make. So again, here are the testicles, the penis of a man. There's the prostate, bladder. You see the urethra going out, so that's how you urinate in the toilet. There's the anus of the man, pubic bone, woman, anus. There's your vagina. You have your pubic bone. You have your bladder. And then they show over here, you're seeing a picture of the ovaries right there. Okay, so we're just talking about the physical anatomy of a woman and the physical anatomy of a man. These two things that we're seeing right here are absolutely perfect and dictated by a genetic blueprint that makes no mistakes. So if you are born with a penis, your genes dictated that you are a man, and if you were born with a vagina, you have a genetic dictate that you are a female. Our genetic code is directly from God himself. There is no mistake there. None whatsoever. This is absolutely a perfect system, right? None of you that are listening to this show right now knew what you were doing when you were a sperm. But when you came out of your father and went into your mother, you knew exactly where to go. Now, what human has the type of genius to make some system like that happen? None whatsoever, right? And so again, this is not to be vulgar. If somebody doesn't want some specifics about sex for your children, if your children are watching, please turn them away, or maybe they just can watch and have some education, right? So here's penis. A man is ejaculating into a female. This is how it happens. It goes into what we call the cusp of the vagina, which is a little demarcation behind the uterus, right? This is the opening of the uterus called the cervix. And so a man's ejaculation stays there, and when a woman is having her orgasm or just some pleasure moments during the sexual act, that cervix dips down into that semen. Now the semen, this fluid that we see, is the fluid that comes from the prostate. I talked about that in the prostate program. Go back and check it out, please. The sperm that they're showing in here is much bigger than it would be in reality. Okay? So I just wanted to let you know that the reason why we have fluid that comes out of the prostate is to take the sperm where they need to go. Because if we were to make this a realistic picture, you would still not be able to see the sperm. But for sake of conversation, the sperm is here, the cervix dips down into it, and that's how the sperm gets into the uterus. Now this is the uterus, and that is the fallopian tube, and that's the egg that matured in the woman's ovary and was released, because that means she's ready to get pregnant. Doesn't mean she's mentally able, but physically she's able, right? Because this happens as a young girl gets into her puberty. And we know in this society there are many young women who have babies, and they prove every day that they're not mature enough to have a child. And I'm not talking at anybody. When I was in my 20s and probably damn near in my 30s, I wasn't mature enough to have a child. I wish I had waited, because I would be a much better and more patient father now than I was then. When I had my children, I was focused on finishing medical school and starting my practice. So I focused on that more than I focused on being a good parent. Big mistake. Too late for me to do anything about it now. So when I say immature, if there are any young people on here, I'm not talking down at you. We're in a society where 12 and 13-year-old people think they know enough to tell their parents, I don't need you, I got this, and then run into a whole hell of a lot of problems because of that arrogant perspective. But my point is just that a young girl's body is capable of doing these things long before she is mature enough in this society to have a child. So the sperm goes up and is looking for that egg. The egg can be anywhere along the fallopian tube. The egg can even be down in the uterus when that sperm finds it. But the point is that this is a very, very highly intellectual process that the sperm is doing. Very, very a very, very specific process that has no errors in it. That's how great and that's how perfect God's system is. And so the reason why I'm saying that is because as I go through and say the things that I say, there's no way that God made homosexuality. There's no way that God made transgenderism, because he made this system. This is the only thing that a penis is supposed to do other than urinate, is to be part of procreation. A vagina is made to accept a penis. A cervix and a uterus is made to accept a sperm and grow, protect, and feed, and protect, and do all the things necessary for life to grow in that mother. So there's nobody that could ever put homosexuality on God. This is the system that God made perfectly. And again, I'll state as we go through this project, I do believe people can be born homosexual and transgender, but it's just not God's plan. So for those of us that may have done some research, as you can see here, there are many sperm that make it to the egg. So the whole idea that only one sperm makes it, that's not accurate information. That's inaccurate information. Again, going into the depth of the greatness of what God does, and then we start putting our own little silly things, or we want to apply things to God, ain't got nothing to do with God. Look at in here. All of these little ridges that you see are receptors. Every single thing that you see here would be as if we were walking in New York or at some parade, and there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people lining up on the street, and you're looking for your parents. When you're walking next to all these people, what you doing? Looking people. Look, I don't know him. I don't know her. I don't know him. I don't know her. Never seen that person before. You know those couldn't be your parents. You know the people you looking for. And that's what all these things are. They're receptors. This is the inside of a fallopian tube. But that egg has the same thing, a bunch of receptors. And a sperm has a bunch of things like that too. So this process of an egg and a sperm getting together is not a happenstance thing. It's a very highly scientific process. There are receptors on the head of a sperm and receptors on that egg that look at each other and check each other and be like, are you right for me? Oh, are you right for me? Hey, what's happening with you? Are we good? We think the same? We got some things going together? I'm making a little jokey, but that's what's happening. It's a process of evaluation. There are many sperm on this egg, but only one is going to get in there if you have a single child, 2 if you have a twin, 3 if you have a triplet. And in normal nature, I've never seen a parent have more than 3 children naturally, right? So in nature, based on what I believe as a person, and based on all the information that I've studied over the years that I've studied, that's the maximum I think that a human can have naturally. Meaning that when that egg and that sperm get together and they do the evaluation to make sure everything is right, 3 of those sperm can touch that egg, and then you would have a triplet. Every parent that I've ever seen have more children than that were on medications to produce fertility. And I mentioned before that every time I've seen somebody use fertility drugs, there's always something a little skeptical about those children when they come out. Okay, not knocking the parents. I'm knocking these systems that we start using that doesn't take the expertise of God into consideration. Eric, thanks for coming in. So, once that egg and that sperm get together and they start to produce what we eventually see as a baby, it starts in 2 cells. That's the sperm and the egg. A few seconds later, you got 4. A few seconds later, you got 8. And you keep doing the math, because that's what happens. Every cell is, every cell is having a mitotic division. So 2 is 4, 4 is 8, 8 is 16, 16, 32, until you get to this. And, again, I don't really ever try to make myself seem important, but these are the type of things that I studied. And just for you, just understand that the embryoblast is the part that connects to the woman. The blastocyst is the part that starts to produce the amniotic sac and all of the amniotic fluid and all the stuff that's going to nourish the baby. The trophoblast is going to be that outer layer that protects everything. This little light layer of cells right here is where the baby, that's these cells right here that are growing into your baby, right? And so we get to a 3-month-old, we're looking at something like that. It looks like a human, but if you were to take that little baby out, that little thing that you're looking at would look more like that. Nobody wants to see that as their child. Nobody wants to pull that out and hold that. That doesn't even look like a human. It has the look that is going into human, but if you were to take that out and really look at that, it would look like some of those alien movies. It look like some of them creatures that they put on those movies. Sharon Crockett, thank you for coming in. So what is the point that I'm getting to? This is a 3-month-old in utero baby. So at 3 months, this child's sex is just starting to produce itself. I think it's a little earlier than that. I don't mean 3 months exactly, because 3 months, you take that, right? That's 3 months, 4 months apiece, so that's 12 months. It's usually right after this when the differentiation of the sex starts. So this baby right here is what we would consider undifferentiated. It's not a female, it's not a male. Everything in it are the basic constituents of a human, and then a few weeks after this, the baby is differentiated into either male or female because either testosterone or estrogen become testosterone and the androgens, or estrogen and progesterone become the dominant hormones that are being released by that mother's womb. And what is that based on? The XX or the XY chromosome. So if that last 23rd chromosome is XY, in a couple of weeks from what you're looking at right here, you're going to have testosterone start infusing into this child, and he's going to start growing into a male. If it's the XX chromosome, you're going to have progesterone and estrogen start being infused into this child. It's going to become a girl, and she is going to start developing her female breast and pelvic organs, okay? So I hope this is making sense. This is a perfect system. There is no happenstance by this. When people sit and talk about genetic problems, like I was reading something today about people talking about homosexual genes. Well, how is that possible when homosexuals can't reproduce? So see, when you come at things from a perspective of science, some of the arguments that people have out here are absolutely worthless and have no merit. If people are homosexual, 2 men cannot produce a baby, right? Let's go back to what we were talking about, right? If you take this penis and it's inserted in another man's anus or a woman's anus, there's no reproduction. And again, I'm not trying to be vulgar, I'm just being specific scientifically. If 2 females are together sexually, there's no way that anything can happen because, again, I mean, I think that's pretty much point made, right? I don't need to go any further in that. There is no way for reproduction unless it's heterosexual. The only way to reproduce are a male and a female to get together. And some people will say, what about artificial artificial insemination, when they put a child into a surrogate mother, things like that. All of that is still heterosexual. You still have to have a sperm and an egg to produce a baby. So if you have homosexual people, how could they ever transmit that homosexual gene into another lineage of people unless there was some heterosexual sex? I hope that makes sense. You all let me know. Tina Crawley, thank you for coming in. You say, women in my family had babies over 40, no fertility drugs. Grandma had her last baby at 45. Exactly. And just for conversation's sake, today I got a Facebook message from a friend of mine. He was talking about some slaves, like some recordings of slaves back in, I think it was the 40s. And they talked to some people that were literally on the plantations that were slaves, and they were talking about their experience. And one of the men said that his father made it to 115, and at that interview, I think he was like 101 or something like that. But if all of you can remember, there's some people in your family that have talked about families back then where they had 14, 15, 17 children. And sometimes, these men had their family of 15, right? They had a family on the other side of the city with 13, 14 children. So my point is that there was no problem with fertility, right? fertility was not a problem. Fertility is not a problem until you start getting to the things that detriment the body and deteriorate the body, because a person who is incapable of reproduction is not just a problem in those organs, it's a problem in the whole system of the body. And the reproductive system is in bad shape because all the rest of the organs are in bad shape. I hope that makes sense. Julian said, you're just keeping it real. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Sharon Crocker said, you can't make it any clearer. Oh, well, thank you all for the compliments. I appreciate it. Now, here is where we have to start discussing homosexuality, transgenderism, and all of the other LGBTQ plus ideology. Because when this baby gets to this stage, this is at 8th month, right? So this is a baby that even if you took out of a mother, they could still live. They may have to be on, may have to get a little breathing help for a little while. But typically after the 27th week, the lungs are fully produced. And understand that after the second trimester, so that means when a woman is in her second trimester, which would be the 6th month, the baby is completely formed. Brain, heart, lung, everything is completely produced. What happens in the 3rd trimester is growth and maturation and getting the baby to a place where it can live outside of this womb that it's in, right? So at about remember I talked about at the 14th, 15th week is when the sex starts to change. That's still in the 2nd trimester. At the end of the 2nd trimester going into the 3rd trimester, that's when the brain sex begins to occur. What do I mean by brain sex? Meaning that when the hormones of a male, which is testosterone and the androgens, are being produced, and then in a female, the estrogen and progesterones are being produced, that baby is being produced from a physical perspective. In the last part of the 2nd trimester going into the 3rd trimester, those same hormones start to affect the brain, meaning that it's going to give that little boy those physical attributes and physical characteristics that testosterone and the androgens will produce. As well as, if it's a girl, she's going to start to exhibit the qualities that estrogen and progesterone produce. Again, we're talking about a perfect system. This is the God-made system that goes into that baby and produces what God planned to produce. Okay? Now, some of you may need to go back and check out the program that I did on the estrogen assault and what to do, because I talk about a lot of the things that are in society that have an estrogenic effect on our population. And so in that program I talked about, like, if you look at this picture, you see how I kind of have what they call that shadow, right? Because I shave and my hair is starting to come back in. But some of you notice this on your mothers and your grandmothers and your aunts and some other overweight women that you see at your church or just in public. That's called hirsutism, the male pattern of hair on a woman. Sometimes they can even get hair on their chest and on their neck, right? That is not a feminine characteristic from a hormonal perspective. That's a perspective of hyperestrogenism, meaning there's too much estrogen and it starts to cause male attributes. In men, that same hyperestrogenism can cause what some of us see in public. Sometimes we see overweight men and they literally have breast, right? Not chest that looks a little fatty, but I mean breast. And I'm sure that you all have seen it because I see it every day. And I remember as a young boy, I'm not proud of either of these statements I'm about to say, but it is the truth. When I was a young boy, of course, we used to always tease fat people, and we used to tease homosexual people, and sometimes beat them up just because they were fat or homosexual. Again, not proud or don't say that with any desire for anybody to high five me or anything. I'm just talking about the reality of what we did. But fat people and gay people were a lot less in that day and time when I was coming up. And now when you look in our society, you see a lot more of both. They don't deserve discrimination. They don't deserve the hatred that I just finished talking about. But we also have to with that reality of what we're seeing, we have to put that into proper perspective. The type of food that people are eating now, a lot of fast food, a lot of different types of oils, a lot of high fatty food, a lot of estrogenic food. The animals are being injected with a lot more hormones. So it's in the food, it's in the water, it's in the plastic, it's in all your to-go containers, like your plastics and your styrofoam. All of these things can express and release estrogens into our bodies. So imagine, again, we're talking about this little baby that was produced by a perfect system that God produces, but then this mother that has that perfect God system inside of her is in a world that isn't perfect, that has a whole lot of evil and horrible things going on. So as this baby's mind is being produced from a sexual perspective, because there is a sexual aspect to a brain, and I don't mean sex as in the act of sex, I'm talking about the sex of male or the sex of female. There is an aspect that that baby's brain grows into the male perspective or the female perspective. But how can it happen correctly when the mother has hirsutism or the father has gynecomastia, which are signs that his body or her body is being influenced to change as an adult away from normal? How could that not affect that baby? So that's why the person that you're listening to believes that a baby can be born gay. But it's not got anything to do with this perfect system from God I just finished talking about. It has to do with the influence of those hormones, and then the influence of homosexuality being such a fabric of our society now, on every show, always being talked about, always being pushed. They're trying to teach our children about transgenderism in elementary schools now. And that's why there are so many people talking about homeschooling or starting our own schools. We don't have to sit back and allow people to push that on our children. No, not. If we decide that we're going to allow our children to be accepting and non-judgmental of those people, that would be something to do. But to try to force us into accepting those type of things, that should be our judgment and our choice as parents. But the point that I'm getting to is that if all of this influence is happening on this baby's mind, while this baby is trying to just grow, get in contact with this beautiful person that's been growing me all this time, and then knowing I'm getting to a point where I'm getting too big for this place, eventually I got to get out of here and get me some freedom, then you're born thinking that you see a penis, but you really think you're a female. It didn't come from God. It came from the influences that happened on that little baby's mind, boy or girl. And so let me know, I would like to know if I was clear on the perspective where I am now. The point that I wanted to say about Dwayne Wade is twofold. First of all, I think that many people on social media are just always looking for something to detriment, right? I saw Gucci Mane, a rapper from Atlanta, on social media, and he was upset at Pop Smoke's death. And so he made a post saying that he thinks that we have to do better and that we have to stop, basically going after our young men or young women after they become rich and famous and they develop all these, this money or this great success or whatever they do, and then we go and we kill them. So in essence, he was speaking to that, and he was saying that he thinks that we need to chill. I heard people making comments like, how in the hell would you have to say anything when you used to sell dope? Damn, why don't we give the ability for our brothers to grow? A whole lot of us have done things that we're not proud of. Most of us as young people did things that we wouldn't want our children to do. Give the man some respect for the fact that he grew and matured. And so I'm saying that because I have seen people attack Dwayne Wade like he's the enemy. That man's not our enemy. Now, what I would say is that if Dwayne Wade knows what he's doing and Gabrielle Union know what they're doing and they have something to do with this little boy winding up like that, then yeah, they deserve everything that they damn get. But if they're not, if they are just victims of all of the estrogen assaults that we're being influenced with every day, they're in the immunizations, they're in the chemtrails, they're in the water, they're in the food, and most people I would say that if any of you know the information that I have been teaching over the last few weeks about estrogen and how they affect the body, if you know that, that's beautiful. But you can walk down the street and probably 9 out of 10 of every person that you see know nothing about what I'm discussing today and know nothing about what you know. So we should kind of hold back in attacking, especially people that look like us, attacking them when they wind up in situations like that. Right? I, as a father, I have a daughter and I have a son. I have 3 daughters in marriage and a granddaughter in marriage. So right now I have 5 children, 4 girls and a young man. If any of them came to me tomorrow and said they were homosexual or transgender, I'm not throwing them away. I'm going to support them. Now, the private conversation that we have is between me and them. But in public, whatever decision that they make, I'll support them. I wouldn't give a damn what anybody thinks. So I'm in 100% in support of Dwayne Wade if that's what he's standing on. And as I say, I believe that he probably is ignorant to a lot of the information that I'm saying. Again, not putting him down, but a lot of these athletes are completely detached from us as regular society. They're taken and they're put out in these communities, and there's pretty much a hedge around them to keep people like us from being around them. And some of that is good because of what happened to Pop Smoke, Nipsey Hussle. Sometimes that is their protection. They need that protection. But there has to be a balance to everything. But if Dwayne Wade is supporting his son or daughter, which he would call them now, I didn't mean to call her it, but if that's what he's doing, I commend him for that. Because if he's ignorant to the science that I just finished going through, which 90% of the people on the planet Earth are, then what he's doing is trying to support his child. Whether you agree with the age and the check saying, oh, hey, all those things we could, but let's not castigate people in public just because you have some opinion that you don't even know how to scientifically get behind. I'm giving information for us to understand the whole reality a little better, but how you come to your own conclusion is your business. I am not a person that bashes homosexuals or anybody else in the LGBTQ community. But it is time for us to have a conversation, especially, and those of you who saw the Malik Yoba interview on The Breakfast Club, there were 2 other people. I don't remember their names, but there were 2 other people on that show. I think it was a homosexual man and a transgender woman. The way that they had that conversation that day, they expect us as the general black community to learn the lingo and get in tune with their community. I don't see that as a bad thing from a physician's perspective, because I have to see people of all races, all colors, all ethnic groups, and all sexualities. If a transgender person came and sat in front of me, which has happened in my career, I'm not going to storm out and curse them up like, I can't stand transgender, and walk out the room. Now, I'm not that type of foolish man. But I have had transgender, or I should say homosexual men and women, or transgender men and women, that have come to see me in my career and asked me to prescribe them hormones to have their sex change. I didn't go along with that. That's beyond the scope of my morals and convictions in medicine. So I'm not putting them down by saying that. I didn't put them down by saying no. There is a standard by which I practice medicine, and that's beyond what I'm comfortable with doing. That doesn't mean I hate them. That doesn't mean I dislike them. David Hawthorne and Khalid, thank you for coming in. So I think we all as a black community have to have more understanding of what the potentials are of causing these people to wind up like this. And then I think if we have a more of an understanding, we probably could have more of a cordial nature with them. We don't have to agree, but we don't have to be disagreeable with them. So I hope you all understood the program today. I hope you understand a little of the science that goes behind what this doctor thinks produces homosexuality, transgenderism. I can't say that I have it all figured out 100%, but I believe what I propose to you today, I think is a large part of why our society has such a large population of homosexuals and the LGBTQ community, and the reason why it is growing so quickly. And so at the end of the day, how does that affect you personally? It affects you personally because those of us that are still in the reproductive age range, how do you know what is going to happen when your children get a little older? How do you know if you're a father, if you're a husband, if you're a mother, a wife, or a child that plans on having children in the future? Do you know how to make sure that these type of effects don't happen on your child? So do you know if your child's going to wind up coming out and being transgender or homosexual? I'm sure some people, as I say it out of my mouth, they're probably saying, oh, hell no, that can't happen to me. Okay. I'm sure there are many people out here that didn't believe it was going to happen to them or their children. But science has a lot to do with why these things are happening. Sharon Anderson, thank you for coming in. Thank you for the compliment. I am sure that there are some things in public that are absolute lies, and there's some things that have some validity. One of the things that I know for sure is an absolute lie is that there are examples of homosexuality in nature. Never once have I ever read any credible evidence of any scientific experiment that showed homosexual or transgender animals in nature. Yes, there are homosexual animals in zoos, and there have been homosexual animals in experimentations where they'll put males in situations like prisons for long periods of time, and they wind up having homosexual animals. But in nature, never been one case of homosexuality. And that's how you know that this is a human thing that is coming from human intervention. And those, again, homosexuals that may be watching, or in the future, if homosexual or transgender people think that there's something homophobic about what I'm saying, and again, that's another part of their lingo that makes no sense to me, because homophobic means, the word homo means the same, and phobic means afraid. I'm not afraid of the same in any way, and I'm not afraid of anything in the LGBTQ community. I just finished saying I've had plenty of them as patients. But the conversation that we need to have is, why has this government been experimenting on homosexuality since the 40s? Why has it been spending billions and not billions, millions of dollars on scientific research into homosexuality since the 40s? And if they've been researching it that long, how can you not take in consideration that it's a potential that's a man's intervention into the production of the great increase of homosexuality? There are some people that are saying that there hasn't been an increase in homosexuality and transgenderism. People are just feel more comfortable coming out about it now. That doesn't agree with the statistics. The statistics, in whatever way that they gather them, I don't always trust statistics 100%, but the evidence is showing that homosexuality is on the rise. The evidence is showing that in certain cities like San Francisco and Atlanta, the homosexuality is real, and it's increasing at a rate that's so far ahead of anything that can be predicted. Something has to be influencing this. It cannot be nature. It can't be natural. As I just finished saying, go back and think about this. A homosexual man and a homosexual man can't produce a child. So how can another child come out with a homosexual gene? A homosexual woman and a homosexual woman can't produce a homosexual child. So how could a child come out with a homosexual tendency from a genetic perspective? It can't be. That is a completely false and foolish and irrelevant explanation. Genes have to be thrown out immediately. We have to start looking at influence. We have to start looking at estrogen effect on the brains of these children, and then whatever other influences that we can consider, like a homosexual man and a homosexual man adopting children. That's a huge homosexual influence, because now you have a little boy thinking that that's his option, is to be with another man, instead of growing up in a household where a mother and father, and he as a little boy grows up and says, okay, I'm supposed to have a mother, or the little girl grows up and says, okay, I'm supposed to have a father. That's the natural scientific reality of what a child will grow up under. Again, I hope nobody is taking this offensive. I hope that you understand this is coming from the perspective of a scientist who has to evaluate things in his field, but also, I believe, Lily Tolbert, my mother, is in. How you doing? Carl Brown, thank you for coming in. Thank you for watching the show, Mama. So it's just one of those things that I think, I hope that I'm influencing the possibility of a conversation. There needs to be a conversation amongst the black community and all communities, but especially the black community, about homosexuality, and how do we make more of an understanding, and how do we get more on a page of understanding with each other so that we don't bash and destroy people that are already under mad um, opposition, right? Because if you're a black person, and let me use myself as an example, as a black man in America with all the racism, police brutality, all the stuff that happened in my career, that was because I was black. Imagine having that against you, and then having against you the fact that you're whatever your sexuality is, and then a woman, right? It could be so much pressure. And so to that degree, I do have some empathy for the people in the LGBTQ community. What I don't agree with is when you equate that to the black problem, because no, I walk down the street, don't have to say anything and get treated like crap. So at the end of the day, that's just the point, that we do have to have some dialogue, we do have to have some understanding, and we as the black community have to have the unity to make it through the days and times that are coming. If you are looking at the same climate outside of this subject, just in America in general, in the world, it's a hell of a place that we're living in, and some hell of a times that we have to make it through. So let's find a way to understand more, understand each other, and have some dialogue that will bring some affinity amongst each other and some ability for us to make it through these times. And lastly, as I'm getting out of here and saying these last goodbyes, you all let me know if this made sense, and if it gave you the ability to understand a little more, and maybe we could further the dialogue with our community as we should. Maria Muhammad, thank you for coming in. Carl Brown says, yes, brother, laying down common science. Thank you, sir. L. Wooten, thank you for coming in. You're coming right at the end, but I thank you for coming in. David Hawthorne, don't mean to get off the subject. Where can I get the Manuka honey? David, when I see you, man, me and you gonna have a little something to have done. But anyway, no, I answered that on my Facebook channel, so check that out, please. Sharon Crockett, very good sense. Thank you very much. So again, thank you all for coming in on one of your Tuesdays. I appreciate you spending a little time with me. Hopefully you gain some news that you can use. And if you are coming in late, you check out the show, you have any questions or comments, send them. I'll respond to them when I get a chance to go back through everything. D. Kiki, thank you for coming in. David Hawthorne, we'll have to get to that another time because that's a long answer. But thank you all for coming in. Remember, having good health in society like we have, the society that we live in takes a lot of hard work. So please work hard on your health. Read something, learn something, listen to something about your health every day. If you are on a health or healing journey, continue to learn, continue to do things to keep you healthy. If you're on a healing, I'm forgetting the word I'm saying right now, but if you have some medical problem and you're trying to learn how to get better, continue to come back, continue to learn so that you can improve your health and live longer than anybody that you know of in your family. Roger, you are so right. In the environment and social influences today are having a much greater effect on a child's natural progression of who they are or are supposed to be. Absolutely. Dikiki says, I hate that I missed the live, do my daughter's mandatory school meeting. No problem. Go ahead, check it out. Let me know what you think. David Hawthorne, love you too, bro, and I'll talk to you soon. Everybody, have a good week. Work hard on your health. Take care of yourself. Until next time. Peace.